to be complemented with the new ones. And today we're going to tell you more about that. But before I proceed with that topic, let us define why even well-documented, well-described attacks are not detected in a timely manner. We identified 4 such reasons. First of all, there are some blind zones. Just the audit of events is not connected to that. Secondly, SOC engineers do not have enough competences. They just do not know how the attacks are being waged and how to detect that. Rarely, but this may happen. Then the errors in the rules logics, when some lexical or syntactic mistake makes the rule useless, and this may happen to the whole SOC life, service life. But the main reason is about no correlation rules, and we'd like to focus on that problem, elaborate on that. Let's have a look at what methods and means are being used by SOC in order to address that problem. One of the methods is to adapt Sigma rules for your CM. Such approach is being applied very often, but there is one deficiency about that. First of all, still the rules would be published with a delay. Secondly, there is another factor. When actually you translate that into CM, there might be some errors and the rules would be useless. Also, there is such an approach as TI reports analysis, but in order to make some new rule, you have to have very vast competence. Not always they could be found. Well, and then this rule has to be double-checked. Very often would be told by SOC that they are using the responses about the IP tests or certain operations in order to cover all the risks and to set the monitoring against the attacks that were waged. But our practice shows that pin tests in a year's time are absolutely useless. We see that partially the threats that were detected a year ago, they remain intact, not fixed. And there are 2 other approaches, purple team and threat hunting, and we will speak more about that today. I think that you know what threat hunting is about, but let me tell you about the concept. This is a SOC analyst who has an assumption and he wants to confirm that. He would take the assumption from different sources. For instance, they would get some insight or he was told about some new attack and he starts his investigation in order to confirm the assumption or to denounce that. If the assumption is confirmed, then the correlation rule would be written, so it means that the SOC database would be enriched. But if it is not confirmed, so probably the attack would remain undetected where there was no attack at all. So in that case, blue team would be engaged most frequently. Now let us proceed with the purple team. Purple team, that's a mixed team made of red team and blue team. In such a collaboration, the teams do not conflict each other but work as a single entity. Red team also does attacks and would implement kill chains, but at the same time would document all its activities as a timeline and would describe certain steps and peculiarities of the attacks. And then that information would be rendered to blue team, and blue team, proceeding from that information, would turn to its CIM, whether all the incidences were detected, whether all the events are there, and if certain incident was overlooked, then the reasons for that would be identified and the situation would be fixed. New rules would be developed where the existing one would be improved, where, for instance, the monitoring system would be somehow augmented. Purple team usually would deal with a chain of attacks, but today we will not be able to tell you about the whole chain. Therefore, we decided to focus on some standalone techniques, individual techniques which are still relevant. and we'll tell you about how the team works. We selected 4 types of attacks, as I said before. They are still widely used and provide necessary results. 3 of them would result in getting unlimited rights for administrators, and time roasting is quite a fresh one, and it was published end of this year, and most likely could not be detected very well. So let us proceed with the practical things. Well, we looked at the test infrastructure. We have the domain controllers, the working station, Windows 10, and extended audit installed there. And attacking computer is Kali Linux, and the protection is Mali Lina. Let us proceed with our approaches. We started with the threat hunting, so you have to have certain assumption in order to start that. So that's a little bit artificial situation. We have only the time and the target of the attack, and the specialist has to identify what tactics was used, and the correlation rule has to be put together. So we know that there was an attack, we know the target of that attack, we know the timing. We try to analyze the event. So 7 types of events, you have to analyze that, but this is very difficult to understand it. And we have to narrow that a little bit. How we can do that? One of the options is to analyze the event which is being used or registered most frequently. For instance, 4688, so there is nothing there. What we can do next? We assume that most likely the attack went on with a certain account, and we have to look at the event 4644 and start the investigation. This is what we did. We found 4 accounts. Administrator user 01, some simple, and the most difficult thing is that you have to find an event which is connected to find an anomaly there, to understand what kind of an attack was waged. We spent a lot of time. Event 5145, which is registered very frequently, most likely it would engage the machine recorded logs. The account in that event is an anomaly, and we decided to proceed from that, what kind of an attack was waged. And we decided to analyze that in more detail. We set the address of the sender, the account, simple, and what pipe it is turning to. So it is event 7711, and that folder is compromised, where actually this is the hacker's account, and we will try to identify what threat was implemented. Actually, there are now too many threats that would turn to LCRPC, principal or back, Petit Patam, they all would go there. But in the first 2 cases, there are other events that characterize that very well. We have LCRPC, and therefore we would make an assumption that this is Petit Patam. We know the source, we restore the timeline pertinent to the initial event, and proceeding from the fact that we have 5145, and we make a correlation rule. And in essence, we are done with our job of a hunter, but we have to make sure that this is right. And so we go to the team and ask whether this is correct. And really, that was Petit Patam attack. Petit Patam is attributed to coerce attack, so a coercion attack. And Petit Patam for coercion is using MSAFS RPC protocol, the remote access to the encrypted files. Petit Patam can be used in different options. For instance, if you need more detailed information, you can scan a QR code. But we selected Petit Patam plus unlimited delegation as a sample. In order to wage that attack, the criminal had to have a compromised host with unlimited delegation pertinent to that. To begin with, let me remind you what unlimited delegation is about. A host which has an unlimited or unconstrained delegation may pretend to be any account of a user or a computer which underwent certain authentication. So let's look at different steps of the attack in order to wage that attack. First, you have to set a TGT interceptor. Then you run an exploit which gets to the pipe of the domain control and would initiate MSEFSFPRC in order to get connected to our captured machine and to do authentication. So it would render the TGT ticket there. Our interceptor would keep that ticket, and then we can use that in order to issue the service tickets and to promote the attack further up to the stage when the user cache data would be uploaded somewhere using the CC sync. This is how actually it looks like in practice. First, we launched such tool as Rubius for Kerberos attacks in a monitoring, and we expect getting connected from the host which has been attacked. Then Kali Linux runs Petit Potam utility. We indicate the compromised account, and we render the name of MS01 offender. This is the one which has unconstrained delegation and IP address of the domain controller. What we see there, that's the pipe that the threat hunter showed us in its investigation. We see that the connection was a success and that the attack goes on. As a result, we got TGT ticket which we can use in order to develop the attack further. So Petit Potam attack is done, and that's it. We have 3 attacks more, and once we will have to investigate that by means of threat hunting. Red team did its job, and actually we still do not know anything. We have only time and target, but you have to come up with the result. We try to analyze again the event, and we decide to go to 55-55, and so we found an anomaly there. And really, just immediately we see that 51-55 has a certain Goldie account which would turn to some pipe called CERT. And we decide to proceed from that. We know the account, and it means that we will find the IP address as well. And it means that we will somehow narrow that information, and we see much less events that could be analyzed easily. 51-56, for instance, and we see that the attacking address would turn to the port 448 and would go to port 88. Kerberos rests there, and besides, we see the event 4668 with the TGT ticket. Subject name is bad admin, and before that the subject name was Goldie. So different names. So where do we get that admin? So it means that they have to be interconnected, or this is a compromised IP address. We start from that, and we're going to look for an event which would somehow be connected to bad admin, and we find that. This is we see the certification center there. So Goldie issued a certificate for bad admin. This is a quite a normal situation. Why? Usually, certification center is being used for the machine certification systems, and they would issue the certificates for themselves. And actually, it can be done by the users themselves. But in that case, we assume that the attack was targeting the vulnerable certificate template, and we restore the timeline. And in essence, we even can come up with a correlation rule. If they actually are the same, so that's good. If they are different, that would sound an alert, an alarm. So in that case, an attack was done against the certification system, and the vulnerable ESC1 template was targeted. In order to make sure that this attack is successful, we need a certification center. We need the domain user account and the vulnerable certificate itself. So let's look at different stages of that attack. First of all, first things you do, naturally, you have to check the settings of the certification center. Then you look for the vulnerable templates, and after that you issue a ticket and you use that later on. So it means that the attack is one step only. So PFX certificate would be issued for the privileged user by the unprivileged user, and then we can use that in order to upload certain data where for authentication of the host which supports such kind of an authentication. Let's have a look at how it works in practice. So first thing you do, we used a certify tool. It works for Linux, and there are counterparts which work for Windows as well. First of all, we scan Active Directories, templates, settings, and we see that here we see some unsecure flags. First of all, we see that there are flags stating that the users may issue certificates for other users as well. Also, we see that there is no confirmation of the certification manager. In essence, when there is a request to issue a certificate, then the manager has to confirm it in order to complete the procedure. Very often you may find a situation that this setting is disabled, and it makes the template vulnerable. And most importantly, we see that the user rights. There are groups of users who can use these certification templates. And it means that every domain user can make such an operation, do such a function. In order to run it, we have to render our account, unprivileged account, indicate the vulnerable template, and indicate the VPN of the domain administrator in order to get certificate for that. As we see, the certificate was issued, it is recorded, and it was used in order to get hash data for the domain administrator. And you understand that once you have the domain administrator, then it means we are unconstrained in our actions. That was the last attack that we considered in terms of threat hunting, and now we proceed with Purple Team. First attack in Purple Team approach, that's the account name spoofing. It uses the combination of two vulnerabilities that you see there. The vulnerability related to Active Directory setting, which helps you, or misconfigurations, which would help you to add accounts without a $sign. You know that $sign actually divides the accounts of the machine and the account of the user. KDC, when it receives a request to issue a ticket, it would scan the accounts of the domain and would look for a name in the request in order to make sure that such a user does exist and he's entitled to a ticket. So the vulnerability 42.287 was identified. If KDC fails to find the account, it would scan it second time and would put the $ on it. So first of all, there should be no patch, because patches would ruin that attack, and the account with the right of changing the attributes of any machine. Let us proceed with certain steps. The first step, you have to create computer object, and by default any user may add up to 10 machines. If that limitation is fixed and the users cannot add any machine accounts, then there might be some compromised user who has such rights, and we will work with that. After that, we would erase a service principal name, because otherwise you cannot rename the machine. We would change the account name to the domain controller, but we remove a $ at the very end. We ask for TGT ticket from the account of the computer. We would return the SMA account name to the previous notion, and we ask the return to TGT by means of the received TGT. As I said, KDC failed to find that account from which a request was sent, would add $, and it coincides with the domain controller. That TGS would be used in order to move the attack forward. So again, we have the rights of a privileged user. As a tool, we used a very well-known tool which automates all these steps. It's called Pachine. There is an alternative to that. And again, we make sure that our controller, the main controller, is vulnerable. Next thing you do, you run it. Among the parameters, you indicate the DC name, the SPN name to get a ticket, and we indicate the login of any administrator, because assumingly this is the administrator that would get that ticket, and our account, which was compromised before. As we see, the ticket was a success, the ticket is stored, and it goes on very well. Doing all that job, we actually recorded all our actions as a timeline. We described the details of the attack, and we rendered that to the blue team. We have analyzed all this bunch of information. We have analyzed all the steps, and immediately you see that the approach is totally different. We have information from the red team with a full description of every step which has been done within the framework of that attack, and we can fix it. We can analyze the steps, not understand what steps have to be, what actions have to be registered. For instance, event 4741, creating computer as an object, then event 4781, 4768, etc., etc. And this is the information we can use in our investigation. We can match that against SEAM. And we set a timeline filter. We have only 15 events, and the events that we analyze within our steps are available there as well. 4741 event, for instance, we see that some engineer set up some account. So this is actually what the administrator did. The 4781 event, we see that the desktop account was changed for the domain controller name, but without a $ symbol. So these events show that actually there is something malicious taking place, and we can apply correlation rules for that. Correlation rules would be developed. We know that the computer was hacked, but we can actually look at TGT tickets and 4748 and 4769. We see that really there was a request to TGT and TGS was issued, and that's it. They are no different from legitimate events, so there is nothing to catch our eye, but the very fact that we know that should make us happy. But we are not going to pay any attention to that within the correlation rule. So we develop a correlation rule which proceeds from event 4741, when we change the computer name to the controller. It looks nice, and we have a rule, but we can double-check that. This is the privilege of a blue team. We write to Sergey. Sergey, push enter. He pushes enter, so he runs an attack, so incident is created. So seemingly that's a success, so we go on. So the next attack, and that's the final for today, at least from us, that's time rousting attack. As I said, it is not so critical as the previous ones, but in essence there might be a situation when a hacker penetrating into the internal infrastructure or doing pin testing. One of the first things he does tries to get some account, domain account, in order to get connected to Active Directory and to understand how the network is being built, and to somehow launch an attack. There might be situations when nothing works because it has been set up very safe and secure way, but guys from Secure published this much research in which they show that we can get hash tags and passwords of the machine accounts just asking that from ATP server. So let's have a look at how it works. Let me remind you what NTP protocol is about. That's a time synchronizing protocol. That's conventional MI NTP, and there is nothing remarkable there, just no protection there. A client sending a request to synchronize time would get it back, but there is no confidence that the answer was provided at the right time. If before the server time was spoofed somehow, or some MITM attack was waged, then there is no confidence that the answer is legitimate. And now, realizing that problem, Microsoft company published NTP extension calling that MS-SNTP that was introduced to the server response, and now we have some additional authentication. So what parameters are there? So the client, when sending a request, that's a domain machine, sending a request would include some encoded read of its account. The server, NTP server, most frequently acts as the domain controller, would take the read, would go to the Active Directory, and would look whether there are any authenticating data of that machine. And finding MTLL hash, it would cipher that and encrypt that and would include it into the NTP package. Then the client would get that package, would compare that against the password hash to make sure that they coincide, and would actually consider that response a legitimate one and synchronizes. This protocol provides protection only for the answers, not for the requests or inquiries. So it means that any machine can change the read to anything. And read is just a number. and surfing through read and sending requests, it would get some hashed password hashes. And then we can try to somehow sprout those hashes. Does it make sense to brood the password hashes of the machines because they are generated sporadically and they would be updated every month? But in essence, there are some exceptions to that rule, so let us consider these exceptions and these rules. Active Directory has such a setting as to assign a status prior to Windows 2000. So this was done for the compatibility for machines which can run only on old Windows versions. If the box is checked, then the password of that account would coincide with the name, but without $sign. If the computer, and this may happen quite frequently, was added to the domain manually by the administrator, then again there might be a situation then that administrator didn't use a strong password, his favorite weak one, and we may find a situation when such a password could be restored, could be stolen, could be hijacked.
Sometime we can see that the computer is switched off after making an account, and at that time the password is in the Active Directory stored, because it's the computer that changes the password, selling updates to the controller domains. In the Active Directory, you can have the function of switching off the password change. All this means that we should be positive and hope that we'll find an account like that. Okay, there is a Python script, so the exploit is pretty straightforward. The IP address of the database server is shared this way, and as a result, we have the hashes, well, hashes from the machine accounts, and so we couldn't manage to brood it in the lab, but in the real project, if the infrastructure is huge, with a lot of history and with a lot of machines, then we believe that about 1% can be restored, and we need only one set of credentials, and this is enough to connect to the controller, to the Active Directory, and to further develop our attack. Okay, we give all the information to the blue team, and we ask them to write a detection rule. Okay, we obtain all this, and we assume that no events should be there in the CM. So we have a test infrastructure. We don't have any other things to analyze the traffic. So we only have the Windows events, and so we try to do this. So maybe we will succeed. Okay, the only event which can open our eyes to what's going on in the infrastructure is 5156. There are many events there. We have some legitimate and some illegitimate ones. We tried to match them to understand that we had no clues. Okay, no read here. Okay, what to do? Well, we think that the only option for us is to go to the machine, to the domain controller, and to see the traffic. So what's the ratio of legitimate to illegitimate traffic? We called Serozha. Serozha launched the attack exploitation. Okay, 25 times more illegitimate traffic than the legitimate one in 30 seconds. So this means that we can code some sigma. That's what we did. So we control the 123 port calls, and the only condition that we should have more than 5,000 packages. So it says that this is time roasting. No, this is not right. This is detecting any ADP server attack. So this is just an anomaly. The detect will go to the CM, but you'll have to investigate the type of the attack. So we can say that the purple team is successful in this attack because we analyzed the attack. It's difficult to detect by using some IDS or IPS. So we implemented a detect with this IPS IDS. So this was the latest attack of the purple team. So we have shared two approaches with you. So technical part of threat hunting. So SOC has been to be developed all the time and upskilled continuously. And for this, you should use any approaches you can have globally and come up with new ones. And if you need to pick one thing, so you have some constraints for decision making, for instance, then our advice would be to use purple team. Indeed, I hope we have shown the advantages of purple team. In this approach, there are two teams. They have competences, and they reinforce each other. And this way, we reduce the time to develop new rules. Our detects are precise because we double-check them, unlike in some other approaches we have considered. And overall, the red team and the blue team obtains some new knowledge and experience. And to sum up, we'd like to say this phrase: let's make SOC better. Thank you for your attention. Thank you. Nikita Kurganov from Yandex. I have two questions. Number one, you mentioned why the attacks take so long to identify. Okay, but why attack on the SOC infrastructure is not mentioned here? So you have log receivers, you are DDoSed, you don't have enough traffic, I mean logs. And you can miss this potentially, yeah, this anomaly. So this is the first reason. So why did you miss it? So we picked the 4 columns. So the chances of SOC infrastructure attack, well, these chances are there, but they are lower than the other 4. Okay, and the second question about time roasting. So this is just a detect on a anomaly high number of requests within a short period of time. Yes, indeed. So if the pin test takes long to go through TID, so he'll be below the radar and you will not detect the attack. Right. A good comment. Yesterday I listened to the lecture about prolonged attacks, and they are difficult to attack, and this is just one of the examples. So if he doesn't take 5,000 in 30 seconds, but say 10 in 30 seconds, then we will not detect the attack this way. Have you tried IDS, IPS? Have you researched this issue? So when we have a lot of monitoring devices, so can we protect in a way? No, not for this case. Okay, thank you. Yeah, indeed, thank you. This is a very good comment. And extending an attack in time is an approach often used by red teamers to dodge detection. But anyway, in most of the cases, attacks like that, they should be there. They should be time-related. So if this becomes more complicated, we should pay attention to this too, and you should test this using a purple team. Why not? Thank you. So you showed some examples, there are some others. So what's the time elapsing from the idea to the implementation? So we have some other things. So how long does it take? Well, for us, as for pen testers, it's not a big deal to run an attack. We have the tools and knowledge, and when a new attack comes, so we try to check it and to use it. Okay, in a purple team, everything happens, well, I don't know, how quickly does it run? Well, if you compare red hat team and purple team, well, purple team happens quicker and more effectively, so we are likely to detect. And one more thing, the rules you make should be pre-tested before introduced. So we send them to our SOC, and they use real infrastructure, they introduce them, and they monitor them to see how many false positives they're going to have, so how many times it will get triggered, and after that it goes into production. But overall, I think the quickest thing can be 1 day. You can deal with one attack, which is not too sophisticated and doesn't have too many steps. So you can spend 1 day describing it, testing it, and drafting a rule for it. Hello, thank you. I have a question. As far as I understand, Red Team is using some vulnerability and attack on the server. Do you do this in practice? When a Red Team doesn't just imitate an attack, but rather some ATP steps. And using the APT tactics, you can build some correlations between the events. So there are some illegal activities which can be identified, and some other legal actions which are not registered by the blue team, but selection or kind of the sequence of events can show you that this is an APT, and can the CM kind of predict the steps in the chain? Okay, thank you for your question. Usually, the purple team deals with the chains of attacks. And we have narrowed down our task to describe the interaction between teams on a project. If we talk about complete kill chains, so we test many things, including the rules related to several incidents, so we correlate them. Predicting the kill chain, if I got you right. Well, SEM cannot do this. You need more expertise, and they need to bring it to the ERP. And there we can kind of predict the kill chain of the attacker, but this will be subject to some probability. We cannot be precise. We can assume that they're going there or there, one way or another. But this is not what CM does. This is what ERP does. Thank you. A red canary question. Why don't you use, for automation of this process, why don't you invite 1 or 2 analysts who will work using ready automation tools to generate events and use them to transfer rules? Thank you. That's a good question. We can do this, and we should do this. We also use some automated tools when the goal is to go through the techniques following the MITRE metrics. So there are some frameworks with some automated checks to be run. And if the idea is to test the coverage of these techniques, we also use some automation tools. But if there is a new attack, these products, well, they will have this check, but with a delay. And in this case, we were more focused on new threats. Well, but we had some old ones there too, some 2 years old, but this was used as an example. But this is a good approach. Overall, we do use it. We use the Red Canary and other products. Which ones? Atomic Red Team, for instance. We know that we have Caldera from MITRE, but we're not using it yet. Purple Sharp, and there are many others, and I think that we should have a look at them. Now we are going to analyze all these automation tools, since they reduce the time to check all the techniques.
Привет, спасибо за доклад. Вопрос такой, вот с точки зрения заказчика, вообще какая экономическая эффективность?
Hello. Purple teaming for the customer. Is it economically feasible? If I have a SOC, maybe I should hire a red team expert who will test a lot of techniques throughout a year. Is it better than buying a project from an integrator? So I would have to pay many millions for a dozen of tested tactics. So I think that hiring someone as a staff member is more effective when you do it regularly, when you do it every day. Thank you. We have described an approach you can use both inside your company and when you order this as a service from integrators or specialized companies. Well, for JET, for instance, Purple Team projects, we have both teams. We have SOC, the customer, and we have 2 teams from JET who come to the project and who run this kind of tests. What do you have? The customer gets blue team competences. Our blue team is made of analysts and investigators. They have a lot of experience, and we reinforce the SOC's competences. And we have had some projects when we would be given only one expert from a SOC, and the others are working hard, because now the SOCs are overloaded, and you cannot always provide a person to analyze threats with the red team to write rules, and frankly speaking, sometimes the competences of the experts in a SOC, well, they vary. Some have seasoned and skilled guys, some people are less experienced. So how do you obtain your experience? So you just deal with the real incidents, so you pay in blood, or you can do it proactively. And to do this proactively, you need some outside competences to generate this load for the SOC. Well, to hire a red teamer who will be inside the organization to work in this way, well, this is a good thing to do. But if the company needs some extra expertise of the SOC experts and analysts, then we have this option in JET, and that's where we can help. But we can do it both ways.
Здравствуйте. Мне такой вопрос.
When do we need to hire a pen tester? When I have 2 people or 5 people in my SOC? Could you say it again, please? Okay. When do I need to hire a pen tester? When I have 5 or 10 or 20 people working for my SOC, what should be the rate? Do you mean a pen tester for this type of activity? Well, I think... Well, this is a good question. I would hire pen testers to make sure that all the low-hanging fruit has been packed. So you have to do this when you are mature. If you run the pen test regularly, if the SOC is ready, well, it's pretty much up to you. Bear in mind, though, that to have a high-quality purple team project, you need good monitoring. You need equipment to register things. You need properly set up events sharing to make monitoring work. And I think that a purple team can be used for this, to make sure that the quality of your settings is good enough. So we can see things when a segment is not connected, for instance. Or we can identify some other cases when some rules have some mistakes in them. So if the processes have been established, then we can do this, and this will be really good. And what will be the rate for you? We don't have any rates. I would add one more thing to your question. When to hire a pen tester? So when the attacker hacks you and you understand that your SOC is not well established. And this time it's important to think about ways to make this more effective. So I think that at this time you will find a purple team and hire a pen tester.